record. Is it going to let me record to the cloud? Yes. So good afternoon. My name is Moikansi Kama. I'm the founder of Image Nation and the CEO of the Soul Cinema Cafe. Welcome to the virtual Soul Cinema Cafe. We are a Harlem-based venue that is scheduled to open ASAP on Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard between 121st and 122nd. We, like many cultural entities, and just life in general, have been affected by COVID. We're virtual until we can complete renovations and open. And so we're really happy to be here participating in the Harlem Week Image Nation Virtual Film Festival. This is our 12th year working with Harlem Week. And this year we were invited to present a virtual film festival. Normally we would do 2 outdoor screenings, but given the state of the world, we decided to take it online, and we get a chance to introduce you to some of the incredible filmmakers that'll be featured this week. So I want to just dive into the conversation. First, I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have Gretchen Hildebrand, who is one of the filmmakers of Decade of Fire. We have Vivian Vasquez Iriazi, who is one of the filmmakers of Decade of Fire. They are co-directors. We have Chris Renteria, who is a producer on the film Whose Streets, which is actually directed by Saban Folayan. And we have, of course, the veteran documentary filmmaker and legendary Stanley Nelson, who is the director of the Black Panthers Vanguard of the Revolution documentary that is showing this week, in addition to countless other films, actually. But so today we're going to talk about cinema and social change. That is the subject matter. And so I'm going to start with Gretchen and Vivian. I would love for you to tell us how you decided to shoot the film Decade of Fire. I think it's a really interesting topic. And it's a subject matter that's quite unique, I think, for the types of films that we see these days. So tell us how that film came to be and how you became a filmmaking duo. You first, Gretchen.
Okay, thank you so much for having us. Well, I think maybe Vivian should start to answer that one because I was really invited into the process after Vivian and our co-producer had like the dream of making the film. So do you want to start that story off, Vivian?
Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for having us. So Decade of Fire was actually a brainchild of Julia and I don't know what, 10, 15 years ago already. She and I worked for a community-based organization in the South Bronx at a time when the small schools movement took hold. And we were starting up a small school and we wanted to teach Bronx students, high school students, their history of the Bronx. The curriculum that we came up with was never taught. It was considered a little too radical, too one-sided. But the questions remained after, creating sort of that curriculum and beginning to talk about what happened in the Bronx, why did my building burn? Or why did the building burn? Why did the neighborhood burn? Why was my community under fire for so long? And so, it started out with the question about why. And Julia initially encouraged me to write a book, but then changed her mind and said, oh, we should do a film. Introduced me to Gretchen. And then Gretchen came over to my house several times, many times actually, but at the beginning, and just filmed me and my friends from, 52 Park, the folks from what I'm going to call back in the day. And she was just like a fly on the wall, filming our conversations. There were a couple of themes that will come up in these conversations. One was that we felt like we had such a great time growing up in the Bronx back in the 70s. It was a time when we all partied together, we danced together, we did art together, we did so many things. And then within those conversations about how much fun we had was the backdrop of, oh yeah, but things were really tough. Things were, what about those fires? What happened there? And so those questions began to emerge as sort of a focal point for making the film. We decided that we were going to make a people's story, that it was going to be a people's history, a people's account of what happened. And so we interviewed countless of community residents that grew up in the South Bronx during the 1970s, to ask them, as well as ask me, of course, but ask so many people what happened. And so there you have it. That's how Decade of Fire was born.
Thank you very much. Did you want to chip in a bit, Gretchen?
No, I mean, that was it. It took us 10 years to make the film. So that was like, chapter one of our journey together. There's a lot more to how we finally got to the final film, but that's it. Vivian, I don't know if you mentioned Vivian, but that was, she's in the film and it was her story. So I think, I was really excited to get to collaborate with Vivian as a non-filmmaker, but somebody who had such a strong voice and such a clear perspective on this history. That I'm not from New York, but it's stuff I knew kind of conceptually, but it was really exciting and a lot of work, but really interesting to work together to tell the story of what those policies actually looked like for people who had to live through them.
Okay, so for people who aren't familiar with the fires in the Bronx and what happened, Vivian, just give us a very quick summary before we move on to the other filmmakers of what the film's about and what happened in the Bronx.
So Decade of Fire is about the story of why the Bronx burned during the 1970s. And we reveal talk about, not so much reveal because folks know about it already, but we really explore a policy that devastated our neighborhoods. And we make the connection to those policies and to cities around the country where mostly poor people of color lived, and how these policies were racist and discriminatory and has impacted the quality of life of housing in our cities. We also shed light on those unsung heroes of the Bronx that actually saved their neighborhood, saved their block. They sacrificed everything they had to restore their neighborhood and to fight City Hall so that the South Bronx can be rebuilt. And what we do basically is we flip the narrative on the fact that we didn't burn the Bronx. We actually saved the Bronx.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to move on to Chris Renteria, who is here representing Whose Streets, who was a producer on the film. So Chris, can you tell us a bit about how you became involved in the film and what your agenda was when you all decided to make that documentary?
I had known Damon Davis, the co-director of the film, for several years. We'd worked together on other projects, and I actually lived in Ferguson on August 9th when Mike Brown was murdered. And so for me, it was in my backyard. And as a photojournalist at the time, I was actively, photographing and kind of documenting and talking to people and just on the ground kind of evolving as the situation went. And Damon and I eventually met Sabah Folian and Lucas Farrar, the DP. And it turned out every night that we were down there and we're protesting or we're talking to activists, everything that was on the news immediately afterward that night was misrepresented from what we actually saw with our own eyes. And we noticed that trend immediately. It just kept happening over every day. And so at first we were kind of not sure, but then eventually it just kind of light bulb went off and we're like, this is it. This is how it works. And so I think Damon and Sabah, from that moment, they always knew that their main goal was to tell the people's story. And that's where that film immediately just took root. Okay.
And what was your role as a producer?
So I was a producer on the ground. I was a camera person. I did sound, unit production manager. There's only 5 of us on the team. So we basically were running around together, just doing everything. But one of the things, one of the biggest things, since I am white presenting, I was the one that actually went in and negotiated all the deals with the police and things of that nature, because we wanted to make sure we really had a realistic view of what was going on.
Okay, thank you. And so Stanley, we're going to start off talking about Black Panthers, but your body of work is so expansive, but I'm going to just stick with that particular film right now. When you decided to do Black Panther, what was the biggest challenge? Because I would imagine that we've seen so much footage about the Black Panther Party. We all come to the table with our own perspectives. The party is kind of glamorized in some people's eyes, vilified in others. So how do you approach a story that big?
Well, you know, I grew up in the 60s and in New York City in Harlem. And so I was 15 when the Panthers came into being. So, you know, I was kind of their target audience, you know, an inner city northern, you know, black kid. And so, you know, the Panthers were always heroes to us. And so, you know, how they had come to be looked at in the media since then was very different from how I felt about them. And so many of us felt about them back then. And so we wanted to tell a different story. We wanted to tell a story from the inside out. We wanted to tell the story in many ways of the lumpen proletariat, as they call themselves, you know, the rank and file Panther members. You know, there's no way you can talk about the Panthers without talking about Huey Newton and Eldridge Cleaver and Kathleen Cleaver.
Right.
You know, Bobby Seale, but we also wanted it to be about the rank and file members.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And so, I mean, I've seen the film a few times, and I know that you must have gotten so many different responses. What was the part that was most difficult to convey, or the part that was most difficult to navigate in making that story? Well, the story was there, obviously, but in telling the story.
You know, a lot of the Panthers, you know, suffer from what I would think would be, you know, PSD. You know, I mean, they're you know, they were traumatized, and so, you know, dealing with the different personalities, you know, making them understand that we wanted to tell their story in a very different way, you know, convincing them to tell their story. I think that was, you know, a hard part. The other thing is that, you know, there's a section where we talk to white police, you know, from out there in California, and we really wanted to get their point of view. And that was a real struggle, and also to get, you know, a former FBI agent and to find those people. And you know, the white cops who are in the film are, you know, maybe in a 2-hour film, they're in it for like 5 minutes, right? But everybody always talks about that piece, you know, how did you get them? And so it was really important for us to at least have what I call, you know, the semblance of objectivity, you know, the appearance of objectivity, and to get the cops and to convince a couple of cops to be part of it. The great thing was that, you know, 30 years later, they still look and talk just like cops, you know. So as soon as you see them, you understand where they're coming from.
Okay. And so I'm going to ask you this question and then kind of move around. When you're involved in documentary filmmaking, and I'm not going to say that's the only filmmaking that can inspire social change, but documentary films have a particular role, I think. But when you're involved in documentary filmmaking and you choose a subject, are you always is there always a goal at the end, or are you just telling a story? You know, I think with something like the Black Panthers film, you know, you're kind of recreating history for generations to come. But is there a goal in mind when you're doing this? Are you aiming for social change?
No, I mean, I'm aiming to tell a story. I'm aiming to change the story. I'm aiming to tell a story in a different way, to tell a story in an entertaining way. You know, I myself, you know, I mean, I went to film school at City College in New York. I mean, so, you know, I'm a filmmaker. I don't consider myself, you know, an activist or a historian. I'm trying to, you know, make films. But I'm trying to make films that I feel that are important, at least important to me. You know, someone said earlier that it took them 10 years to make the film. I mean, that's how long it may take you to make a film. So, you know, I think that as a filmmaker, you want to make sure that it's important, at least to you. Now, that could be anything. If you want to make a film about your navel and it's worth 10 years of your time, then go ahead and do it, you know. But I think that, you know, I'm trying to make films that, for me, you know, are important and maybe, you know, change the way we look at certain stories.
Now, I'm really surprised to hear you say you're not an activist. I mean, as a filmmaker, you could have made Black Panther the action movie. So why the choice to be in documentary?
You know, part of it is history. Part, you know, I mean, I came about filmmaking, you know, in the
Oh no.
documentary film, and you know, films weren't being made about us, you know. And I came at the time when blaxploitation films were big, you know, so we were seeing films about pimps and prostitutes and people pulling out guns, and you know, those weren't the people that I knew and I grew up with. And I thought that there was, you know, there are other stories to tell in the Black community. You know, if my films, you know, if somehow they serve as activist films, it's because that's what I'm interested in.
Mm,
But you know, I see myself first, you know, as a filmmaker. I'm trying to tell a story. I'm trying to tell a story that's going to keep you in your seat for, you know, an hour and a half or 2 hours. Keep your attention.
mhm. Well, yeah, you know, you've certainly definitely created a way of doing that time and time again. The first film I saw of yours was um, Soldiers Without Swords, the Black Press documentary. And I grew up as I was a journalist when I went to school for for newspaper journalism, and came to New York City to write for Black papers. And so that particular film really spoke to me, and and I've been following you ever since. So thank you for your work. So I want to get into the question of impact. So Vivian, tell us, and Gretchen, tell us a bit about how Decade of Fire, what kind of impact that film has made? Because I know it's been shown all over the world. I know you did an awesome tour in Puerto Rico with the Fantauzi brothers. And so tell me, what type of impact has the movie made in the communities where you've shown it? And what was your goal? What type of impact were you hoping to make? Oh, Chris, you're back. Okay, good.
Sorry, my dog was barking. So I think that at the beginning, you know, we're a team of four, right? We were a team of two, then a team of three, then we became a team of four. But like somewhere in the middle, Gretchen, I don't know if that's correct. You know, for me personally, the story was about why my neighborhood was burned, right? What happened? And the more research we uncovered about redlining, urban renewal, you know, what we learned about in terms of the racist policies, the way that we were neglected and abandoned, I realized that that the more things changed, the more they stayed the same in terms of people's, you know, accessibility to affordable housing, to having a home that's clean and decent. You know, the narrative about what's told of people of color, you know, that hasn't changed. And so we began to look at the film as a way to start conversations about, you know, the inequities in housing, to start conversations about how young people can activate and do something about their neighborhood, improve their communities, you know, to talk to people about how, you know, we have to learn from the past in order to move, learn from the elders, the people who came before us, about how they saved the community and how the work is not done. So we focused on, you know, even before the film was done, we already had an impact campaign plan where we, you know, we looked at, and this was mostly Julia's work, she looked at the cities that were redlined and that were affected by urban renewal back in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and saw that those were the cities more affected by gentrification. And the connections that we made, those connections. And then we realized that what we did was we just approached these organizations. Some of these organizations she already knew, because Julia is an activist, housing activist. And you know, next thing you know, I'm traveling, I'm going all over the place with my luggage and my husband to all these places where, you know, folks are fighting unjust housing policies, you know, Latinx and Black-led organizations, cultural organizations, faith organizations. So the film was shown to folks to start the conversation and activate them in what's going on in their community now. I don't know if you wanted to add a little bit more, Gretchen.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, Julia is Julia Steele Allen, who was like our co-producer on the film, but also the impact producer. And, you know, we started out with like a 20 screening rollout in New York City with the impact campaign. So that was like screenings with 20 different community organizations in 20 different neighborhoods. And we kind of, our goal there was actually to start in the neighborhoods that were targeted for rezoning by the de Blasio administration. So, and that, you know, I think what was a challenge about having an impact with this film is it's not like there is a national organization that is actually dealing with housing specifically or gentrification specifically or like a national campaign. It's kind of this thing that's happening very
Localized.
locally. Exactly. So we kind of decided to take that route and make the film a tool that could happen, and that could also be a bridge for people who are trying to bring more people into the conversation and get them activated, and also find other people who are doing the similar work. So we had, like, in 2019, when we really got lucky with, we got this all done, like all this happened last year. But we had over 100 screenings last year, and some of them were like 5 people in, you know, Whitesburg, Kentucky, and then some of them were like hundreds of people in Puerto Rico. We had really massive, you know, like it was across the board, but it was a really great, you know, it was an amazing opportunity to like talk about how these policies and this history directly has impacted so many people in different places. Like every place we would go, there was someone from the Bronx there, everywhere, everywhere. Like, you know, it was, I mean, like I went to like the Cleveland Film Festival and there was a woman from the Bronx who brought her son to see it, you know, but then also people, this history is so pervasive, you know, it was really a great platform for people to talk about those local issues, because this same thing, not only the policies, but the blaming of the community was like textbook in all of these places. So it was really helpful to give people like a grounding as a way to talk about their own.
So is there some type of curriculum guide or toolkit
Mhm.
that accompanies the film and helps people galvanize and then, you know,
Yeah.
activate in their local neighborhoods?
We have a screening guide if you want to, for anybody who wants to have a screening for their own community group or just in their, you know, like neighborhood, their neighbors. You don't have to have a group. So we have a guide on our website, which is decadeoffire.com. And then we also just released, I don't know if you want to talk about that, a curriculum for high school students that Vivian and local educators worked on. And that just got released on our website. So we have both of those things for people who want to use this as like a learning guide.
Okay. You want to talk about
I just want to add one thing really quickly. It wasn't completely, it wasn't total, but for the most part, when we went into these communities, we actually raised the money so that we paid the community organizations to hold a screening. So we took nothing from them. We actually gave them. We covered costs for food. We covered costs for renting of space, of equipment. We covered all the costs that these organizations, because we didn't want to impose ourselves that way financially. And so I think that was one of those things that worked out for them and for us.
Did you receive fund? Who were your national funders? How did you support the filmmaking and the initiative to tour the film?
Well, we got funding from like originally the Bronx Council on the Arts, tiny grant. We did some like crowdfunding, but the first like big institutional funder that we got who really like galvanized and allowed us to make this film was the Ford Foundation. And they've been like a really, they funded production and impact in like for several years. Like they really believed in the vision of the film. So we were really lucky to work with them. And then it was an ITVS funded project. And we also got funding from Latino Public Broadcasting and Black Public Media.
And then CERDNA.
Sorry?
CERDNA?
Oh yeah, and CERDNA funded the Puerto Rico tour. Yeah, there was like community funders and like the New York State Council on the Arts too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, Chris, I want to come to you now to talk to us a bit about impact. What impact do you think you made with the film Whose Streets? And also, now that we're just coming out of, I guess we're in the midst of even the response to the George Floyd murder. What impact do you think your film has made in telling these stories? And do you see any parallels in terms of how new stories are being told?
Well, I think first and foremost, like Damon and Sabat both, like from the beginning, like what they wanted to do was make a film that was representative of the Black voice during this time. And so like when Black folk would watch it, like it would be able to like hold up a mirror to like, what is the experience in their lives, wherever you were. Like it was a lot of the same things were happening. So, that was an immediate thing. And then also in long term, as far as like an educational tool, we always knew like this film may not take hold immediately, but this was something that would eventually become something that like your child or my child would see in their lifetime when they were old enough, that would actually tell the story of what happened on August 9th, 2014, in a way that hadn't been recorded before. And so the Impact campaign was very large, and we had a lot of support. And actually, Stanley and Firelight were one of the first to come out and support the film, and we're still maintained great support, and we appreciate that. But we were lucky enough to get with POV to be a part of their program, and so they've worked on. We have different toolkits like Vivian was saying and Gretchen. Some really great discussion guides. So, you know, whether it's like in your living room or it's in a crowd of like 500 in a university, there are tools where people can have those discussions, because a lot of the things that happen in some of these films are, you know, I think can be really hard for people to unpack sometimes. And so being able to have those tools are so important, to be able to like have that discussion afterwards, even if it's just with somebody on your sofa that you just watched the film with. It's been really helpful.
And so when a filmmaker decides, I'm going to create these tools, who are you working with? Who do you go to kind of take the project into that next realm of life? Who are you working with? Educators? What type of funding sources are there to help make these curriculum guides and toolkits? Like, how do you get to that stage?
We've been fortunate that, you know, with partners like POV and Doc Society and Firelight and others, there's just brilliant people that are working with these organizations that work in tandem with the mission statements and director statements of the films, and like the goals of the directors and teams of these projects. So like just using like the caliber of people that are writing a lot of these toolkits and things are really getting the voice out. They're really tapping into these resources. And so that's where we've been very fortunate.
Okay. Thank you. So Stanley, do you want to talk a bit about Impact? I mean, you have so many different films that you could draw this question from. I think about Emmett Till, which there were 2 Emmett Till films when yours was out. And I think, you know, between all of the different conversation that was started, that case was reopened. So talk a bit about how your films have made an impact and how you approach that particular aspect of documentary filmmaking. You're muted. Okay.
Exactly. When we made Emmett Till, I guess almost 20 years ago now, we learned so much. I mean, one of the things that happened was one of our first screenings was at the Schomburg, in Harlem, and we had never screened the film before. We screened it at Schomburg, and people got up in the audience and they were mad. I mean, they were like, let's march like right now to Money, Mississippi and burn the court down. And so we were trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we use this energy? And we came up with the idea of handing out cards at all the screenings that people could fill out to reopen the case. And that they could either give them back to us and we would mail them in, or they could take them home and mail them themselves, but they were addressed to the Attorney General in Mississippi. And we printed up 5,000. We gave all those out. We printed up another 5,000 and gave all those out. So we gave out about 10,000 cards, and we were just really surprised, when the case was reopened. And
we gave them out at the Apollo.
Yeah, we gave them out. Yeah, we gave them out everywhere. And we're just really, surprised that the case actually got reopened. And we realized the power that you could have with these films, the power that you could have with Impact, and that you want to get that energy that you get when you screen it and have it do something. So, we really kind of concentrated at Firelight on Impact. We ran an Impact lab for a number of years where we trained filmmakers of people of color to work on Impact with different organizations, because we felt like there were not a lot of people of color doing Impact. And one of the other things that we realized is that, we could, as people of color, could do the Impact much better and could think of what to do much better. So Emmett Till we did for American Experience, and they wanted us to, get on to Larry King, and we were like, well, what does Larry King care about the murder of Emmett Till? And so what we did was we called up we called up Black executives and all the news channels, you know, at CNN and ABC Nightly News and NBC Nightly News and CBS. We found out the highest ranking Black person on those news shows and called him up and said, we have a film on Emmett Till. And the Black people were like, Emmett Till? Yeah. You know, they understood immediately. You know, Larry King was like, who the hell's Emmett Till?
Okay.
And so, you know, we use that. And, you know, it just made us realize more and more how important impact is, and you know how filmmakers have to do it. You know, one of the things that you asked about funding is, you know, so many times, you know, funders are realizing that, you know, they can put money into the film, but if they don't put money into the impact, nobody sees the film. So
Right.
a lot of times filmmakers can go back to people who funded the film and get some money for impact and have a separate kind of fundraising campaign for impact. But we push everybody, you know, that we work with in the lab and other programs that we run at Firelight to really think about impact, think about it from the beginning, you know, and think about how you can be part of it, because that's what's important. I mean, there's no better advocate for your film or for the message of the film than the filmmakers.
So tell us about Firelight for folks who don't know what Firelight Media is. Yeah.
So Firelight, we have two divisions. You know, there's Firelight Films, which is the for-profit media, the for-profit company that makes films. That's Firelight Films. And there's Firelight Media, which is nonprofit. We run a number of programs. For 10 years, we've been running the documentary lab, where we work with filmmakers like the makers of Who Street to help them get their film made and done and on the air. We go to different foundations and others for grants. So we never take a penny from filmmakers ever. And we've had some very successful films like Who Streets, you know, but, you know, we try to help in any way we can, you know, providing mentorship, looking at cuts, whatever we can do to help filmmakers get their films made and out and on the air. We just started a fund called the William Greaves Fund, which is for filmmakers doing their second film, and it's named after one of the first African American documentary filmmakers, William Greaves. And so, you know, we're doing that. We have an impact lab where we work with impact producers, and, you know, just trying to figure out whatever we can do to help, you know, filmmakers of color get their stories told.
Awesome. Thank you for your work.
No.
So before we wrap, I want everyone to tell us a bit about what's next, and maybe what's happening in the life of your film. For the audience, of course, if you did not see the film yet, you can see all the films that are being shown in the festival on Sunday, August 23rd. They'll be playing all day, and of course the films are playing daily. So but before we wrap, I would love for each of you to kind of tell us what's next for yourselves as individual filmmakers, and what's next in the life of your film, or where people can find it beyond here at the Harlem Week Image Nation Virtual Film Festival. Gretchen and Vivian, you can go first. You're like one person. I'm like,
I know.
Vivian. Oh, Vivian, you're muted.
Sorry. Okay. So our high school curriculum premiered a couple of weeks ago, and it has very extensive, 6 lesson plans that are just amazing. So I encourage people to get on there and look at the curriculum, which is going to be great. We have some of the teachers now. They're teaching it virtually, which is fabulous. We have been working on modules, like little mini films on topics based on the film. So her head sticking out there, based on the film. So we did one on what it takes to organize your block and organize your community. It's called Defend Your Block, which is on our website. When we went to Puerto Rico, we interviewed people who are working around the Financial Control Board, the same Financial Control Board model, based on the same Financial Control Board model that devastated people of color in the South Bronx in the 70s and in Detroit in the 90s. And they're now taking that model to Puerto Rico. So we're going to do a small module. Gretchen can talk a little bit more about that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, pretty much what Vivian just said. But we were going to make one short film about financial control boards, and then now it's just turned into a mini web series because it's like there's so much to unpack there. But I did just find this archival piece where the guy who was in charge of the Financial Control Board in New York City, this interviewer from the BBC is like, is this dangerous for democracy? And he's like, well, some people call us a junta. And that's actually what they call the Financial Control Board in Puerto Rico. They call it La Junta because it's taking over their, you know, their government. So we're just
What's
trying.
La Junta mean?
What does it mean, Vivian? What's the best
La
translation?
junta is like considered like an oligarch, militaristic, fascist
Okay.
form of government. You know,
And
it's-
who takes over from a democratically elected government, like seizes control through
Right.
usually through military means, but they don't need to even do that anymore.
Like those who initiate coups. Okay.
Right. And
Exactly.
in Detroit, it was one person.
Yeah.
They appointed one person to make all the cuts that they did, especially, you know, to cut
Yeah.
people's water. So
Yeah.
not democratic at all.
Yeah. So we're working on that, and hopefully, you know, it's a little hard to get anything done these days. So we're still working on that. And then we have another short film about artificial intelligence and the Rand Corporation, who plays like a minor role in our film, and how this idea of computer modeling has kind of infiltrated so many parts of our lives, so that, you know, people are familiar with like the debate around facial recognition, which is a really egregious example of that. But it's like the child welfare system, your healthcare, the justice system, all of this is done by computer models. And so kind of diving into the roots of that and what the, you know, like what people need to know about it. So that's what we're working on now.
Okay. And you said web series. I'm just curious for all the filmmakers. Are you feeling that there's a lot of opportunity on the web right now, or do you still have a preference for more traditional filmmaking? And especially in terms of monetization. I mean, you can make a film and put it up on the web, but are you ever going to monetize it, and are you going to reach your audience? So I'm just wondering. Vivian, your expression is hilarious. You're like,
She never
"Oh."
made any money anyway, so I don't know about that part.
Okay. All right. Well, Chris?
So, Whose Streets, unfortunately, I think to your last question, I didn't answer all the way with George Floyd and what happened in Minneapolis. Unfortunately, Whose Streets has become very relevant again. And so, you know, Whose Streets is starting to see a resurgence in Europe. Amsterdam, I think we're having a screening at IDFA coming up, as well as some other festivals across in the US as well. And so that's okay. So that's coming. But as far as other projects, I was really lucky to work with Sabah on her next project, about the Equal Rights Amendment, its passage in Virginia. So we've been on that for the last couple of years, and that should be wrapping up pretty soon. And then Damon Davis and I are working on another feature film about somebody who's been on death row for 27 years here in Missouri, called Chain of Rocks. And so other than that, you know, there's lots happening in St. Louis and in the Midwest and a lot of red states still that that people need to know about. And so criminal justice reform, the DAs that are being elected out of Ferguson, those kinds of things. We're working actively on other projects concerning those as well with other directors.
All right. All right. So Stanley, do you want to tell us what's next for you? And then we're going to wrap.
Sure. The Black Panthers Vanguard of the Revolution. I think it's PBS just cut a deal with Amazon, and so it's on Amazon, or you can find it at, find out at pbs.org. They also re-released Emmett Till, Freedom Riders, and Freedom Summer in the wake of George Floyd's murder at pbs.org, and those are screening for free for a while.
Oh, awesome.
Miles Davis, Birth of the Cool, a film we did last year, is on Netflix now, and you can see it on Netflix. Just hit Miles Davis. And we just finished a film that we're doing the color correct now for Netflix on the whole crack era of the 80s and into the 90s, and going from people smoking crack to the militarization of the police and the war on drugs, and kind of a piece of the story of how we got to where we are now, that we all saw with the George Floyd killing, and you know, police looking like something out of Star Wars with all the equipment that they're getting from the government. So
Yeah.
finishing that now, and it should be out in the fall on Netflix. It has the inventive title of Crack, so it's called Crack.
Okay. That's a permanent title. You're done? Just crack?
We're done. We got the graphics. It's called Crack.
Okay.
We don't want anybody to make a mistake and see anything, you know. So it's
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you all for spending this time with us. I know that summer hours are precious. So thank you so much for taking time to talk to us about your work. We look forward to seeing what you have coming up next. And also for the audience, please check out soulcinemacafe.com. That's our website, so that you can be kept abreast of when we're opening. We're also launching a Soul Cinema Drive-In. It'll be the only drive-in movie experience in Manhattan. We're showing the Miles Davis film, which we're very excited about, and it's free. So make sure you go onto our website and get on our mailing list so that you can be a part of that and all of the wonderful things that we all have coming up. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, folks.
all right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all. Thanks so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.